Hey Shoujo fans, welcome to episode 55 of the Shoujo Sundae podcast. This week we will be reviewing Belladonna of Sadness with special guest Aurélie Petit. Let's dig in.
Brain freeze, go chewy. できるかな handle me. 高すぎカロリー、シュガー以上甘い。Feeling with you next to me, baby. おかわりね、仕上がれ。
Hey everybody, we are doing a content warning. This episode of Shoujo Sundae will have us reviewing Belladonna of Sadness, which focuses on the violent rape of a woman and the aftermath of said rape. If you are unable to listen to this episode, we fully understand. We plan on interviewing our guest Aurélie about her work and her paper, Do Female Anime Fans Exist? Feel free to stop listening to this episode once this conversation on her paper is finished. We will have the timestamps in our show notes. You can decide to listen to a previous episode that we released or wait until our next episode comes out. We will see you guys then if you are leaving post.
Hey Shoujo fans, editing Giana here. I just wanted to give a quick heads up that we had some technical difficulties while we recorded this episode. Unfortunately, some of Aurélie's audio is hard to make out at parts throughout this, spanning between the 26-minute and the 1 hour, 17-minute mark. Both Dan and I tried to fix it in the edit, but in the end, we weren't able to salvage 100% of it. We hope this doesn't deter you from listening to our discussion about Belladonna of Sadness and that you enjoy the episode. With that said, let's get back to the show.
Hello, Aurélie.
Hi.
Hello. We're so happy to have you on our podcast.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I'm so happy, and I didn't tell you guys, but being on your podcast was one of my professional goals.
Really?
Oh my goodness.
I was like, all the cool girls in anime are on your podcast. You know, it's a stamp of approval.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. We're honored.
Thank you. I feel so I feel so honored for real, honestly.
And I was too proud to reach out directly.
Oh
No, honestly, I think Giana, I think we saw your tweet about wanting to go on a podcast.
It was directed to you.
It reached us. It reached us.
It reached us. We saw it. We're just like, we'd love to have her on. We just need to figure out what we would have you on for and stuff, whether it would be a series or a film. So we're so glad to have you on specifically for Belladonna of Sadness. I guess for the people who are unaware, could you explain who you are, what you're getting your PhD in, and why you chose to focus on that subject?
Yeah, so I describe myself as a social researcher and a visual researcher, and I focus mostly on the intersection of technology and animation. And in my work, I always focus on gender and sexuality. So that's why I'm here today. And so I'm a PhD candidate right now. I'm based in Canada, and I'm at Concordia University in film studies. And so a lot of my dissertation talks about women anime fandom and, kind of the exclusionary practices that have excluded them from identifying with anime community, despite having always been part of anime communities, especially in the US. And also the intersection of identity. So how Black women are so very, excluded or invisibilized. And how Asian women, East Asian women, are going to be very sexualized and everything. So I'm doing this work, and I work a lot also on pornographic animation. So it's a perfect movie for me.
Yes. I feel like it was the perfect choice to have you on and stuff. And honestly, I think that the work that you are doing and your focus is so important because of course, I'm not just saying us, because female anime fans have existed and have been existing for a very long time, but we're so glad to have you on specifically to not only talk about Belladonna of Sadness, but also your research as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Another question that we wanted to ask is, What do you love most about shoujo and josei content?
Well, that's the thing. My introduction, of course, to manga was like, Detective Conan, Dragon Ball, blah, 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 because I was a child in the early 2000s. But the first time I really read a manga was Marmalade Boy,
Oh,
and it opened to me like this door of shoujo. And then during my old teenage years, I just kept on coming back. Of course, at the time, very much the high school romance. And I loved it. And I was like, and I loved comics and I loved animation, but it felt very like masculine. And I'm French, so I was like growing up in France, which we have a very, very big manga culture. And I was like, suddenly I found this medium when you had all of these female-centered stories and, women like comic artists, like mangaka. And I just really fell in love with like seeing myself, seeing, things I was going through, like falling in love, being represented. And then like as I was growing, discovering, artists that were talking about more mature stories. Like that's something I've always felt very grateful. And like, for a moment when people were talking about comic cultures being so masculine, I was like, I don't really relate because I feel like I read a lot of comics made by women, but they're Japanese comics.
Yeah, I fully agree as well. I think having, at least being able to see that representation in manga was very important to me when I was growing up because I wanted to get more stories that centered the emotions that I had at the time. And like when I was growing up, and I'm sure it's the same with Giana as well. Like I know like one of our first animes ever was like Sailor Moon.
Yeah.
But then like in addition to that, it was like that Toonami era. So we were watching like Dragon Ball as well, like you mentioned too, and stuff like that. And honestly, I didn't realize what anime was, but when I saw it, I was just like, okay, well, I want more stories like Sailor Moon. I want more stories where the female lead is the focus and stuff. And then eventually getting into comics and seeing more of that, I was just like, okay, I really love this. This is so important.
But
yeah,
I feel very grateful because France, sometimes it's called the second country of manga after Japan. We have a very big manga culture. And I've always had access to shoujo all the time. And now I think in recent years there's been this movement on French Twitter and French manga Twitter called Free the Shoujo, which is like a cry to distributors and editors to actually release in France all of those shoujos that are, very traditional and we just don't have them translated. And so often it's trending. It's like, if you have Francophone, it's called Libérer les Shoujo. So it's funny to know, in other contexts, people are also kind of organizing to bring this culture to a broader audience. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah. I think it's beautiful as well. I've been so jealous of French manga Twitter because y'all get all these different licenses, and I'm just like, when will it be us?
When is it our turn?
Well,
when is it our turn?
I think that's the thing. You guys get more fan sub, and the culture of fan translation is just bigger in English, but we get more official releases.
Yeah. And then I think one of the people we follow, I believe that her name is Retro Shoujo Lover. Yeah, and she's French as well. And so it's like sometimes I'll just be like, oh, I want to read that too. Like I felt a certain level of kinship. So I was like, I want to read this classic story as well. And she would talk about exhibits. It's like, I want to see this. Yeah.
No.
But let's move into your research paper, Do Female Anime Fans Exist? Which actually I think that was probably our first introduction to you because we saw you talking about it on Twitter. And then I was just like, hey, can we see it? Because I was just like, I don't know if we can pay, but I would love to read it and stuff. And you sent it to us, which was so nice, which is this was, I guess, because this is coming out in 2024. This is probably at least probably 2 years ago.
Yeah. A year and a half. Wow. It was released in the summer.
A year and a half ago. Yeah. Okay, to begin with, I'd love to ask you, what inspired you to write the paper?
Well, it's the first chapter of my thesis. So what inspired me to write the paper was also to write my thesis. But, you know, I kind of like the way I tell the story of how I went with my dissertation is when I was in France during my master. I did my master on the reception of hentai in France. And I kind of went, to Canada and to do a PhD, really thinking I was going to write about pornographic animation for like my entire dissertation. But, the more I was looking into it, the most I was like, there seems to be this very big, reproduction of social inequality, of social discrimination in anime fandom that I need to talk about pornographic animation. Like, I don't see how I can talk about hentai without talking about misogyny in anime fandom.
Yeah.
So, like, the way I really see my dissertation, which hopefully, of course, is going to be a book at some point, but it's as a way to support a research I wanted to do, like a necessary stepping stone as a way to frame the anime industry, to frame anime community, to do like this work I'm doing, more now about pornography. But yeah, it's like I was like, okay, I want to talk about gender. And, all the way I kind of go to do this research work is I come with a lot of assumption and I do the field work and everything gets contradicted. I was like, I don't think there was this many women. And then I found out that like the biggest online community was like created by a woman. And that women were here, but people kept on just trying to pretend they were not. And it's the same with like, fan of colors and everything. I kind of thought at some point I was like, well, I'm kind of assuming that the fandom was very white. But then the more I read through conversations, I'm like, oh, but people are actually saying, there is a point in time when like this discourse of anime fandom being white, just like anime fandom being male, started to form. And it's like a discourse that wasn't, despite of like contradictory like demographic evidence, like they were like fan of colors in conventions, they were sharing their experiences, but for some reason people thought they did not exist. And so I'm very interested in like this, how like the anime fan identity was constructed as like a white man. And like, and
yeah, like white men.
Exactly.
Only.
And then like you push it to the, to the anime avatar, like discourse that got very big during the 2016 elections, which again is a way of like excluding other people from like anime fandom by doing like an anti-anime. And, by saying like, oh yeah, if you have like an anime avatar, even as a joke, like you vote for Donald Trump, it's like, well, So, yep.
Yeah. No, I mean, when I was reading it, I remember when that politician made that Attack on Titan video, like killing Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, who's like the representative of like New York. And it was very crazy because I was just like, why is Attack on Titan? Why is anime suddenly in this conversation and stuff? But you were right, because him even being able to do that sort of stems from this highly like gendered place within online anime fandom where like not only were people erasing women that were in the anime fandom, but then at the same time harassing them as well, just like how it was happening, just like how that one politician did. I do not.
It's Paul Gosar.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I had to write his name a lot. So.
Yeah. Okay, so your study of rec art anime depicts that the issues of online misogyny that female anime fans face today is due to how men in forums actively pushed women out of male territories. One of the things that I noted was the fact that you use the term like negative networking. So could you explain to everyone what negative networking is and give us some examples of it from your research and like I guess also current examples as well for people to feel connected?
Yeah, negative network, it's a term I created because I needed a term to kind of define what I was seeing. And I wanted to talk about, what we would call social technical systems. So, like system online that are like technical and socials, which I was like, okay, it's a network. And then I was like, it's a bad network. It's people who come with bad intentions and who commit bad action. So I was like negative. I was like, okay, negative network. Great name, great title for a book. But then what I really wanted to say when for example, if I say anime fandom was constructed as a negative network, it's this idea of a network that does not look, outside. It's very close. It's like this idea of there is no reproduction. It's like almost like there is an homogeneity of we're going to be in an echo chamber and we're just going to reproduce constantly the same actions. And we're never going to open, we're never going to look what other people are doing. It's like, which is the principle of like negativity. It's just, you're like trapped and like nothing is created. There is no point of view. And yeah, it's like how anime fandom kind of got trapped into this idea, or like, the idea that many people have anime fandom of what it was. And so I think that to create a negative network, you need to do negative networking. So when like in the article I say, harassing, sexualizing fans, like pretending they don't exist, like all of this, they're a series of attacks, harmful attacks to marginalized people that has only for goals to like further marginalize them. So by doing this, you end up becoming a negative network.
Yeah.
That's the title of my thesis.
The title of your thesis is negative networking.
Yeah, and I think it's like applicable, to video games community, to like live streaming. Like, the goal would be, of course, for it to just become a term that people can use to talk about communities that like, have traditionally been very informed by their prime users, by designers, by builders. For example, like the fact that I go back to the 90s is because I'm like, this problem has been happening for a long time.
Yeah. And honestly, it reminded me a little bit, not negative networking, and it's like the way that they were trying to push women out of the conversation altogether and then act as if women weren't even there. It reminded me of gatekeeping a little bit. Like, oh, anime is only for cisgendered men, specifically white men, but cisgendered men, and there's no room for women. But that's not the case at all. Like,
yeah, it's the same. It's like, gatekeeping is like, you could say, is like a negative networking practice. It's like create a gatekeeping environment. Maybe I should change it.
No, you don't have to change it. I just made that connection. I was just like, oh, it reminds me of like this. Yeah.
No, and it's interesting. Like a few years ago, I was teaching a class on fandom at Concordia, and we had a debate with my student of like, is gatekeeping good or bad? And it was funny to kind of like listen to everybody's argument, because when you talk, something I ended up looking into the article is like those men who actually were saying we're trying to protect our community from people who don't know anime enough, and this, saying, we're trying to keep it almost a safe space for us. And of course, then it's like always come at the expense of like people who don't traditionally fit, what those men were expecting anime fan to be. Like I remember when they were saying that this woman, Stephanie De Silva, like she was a newcomer when she had hundreds and hundreds of messages. And it's like, what is a newcomer? Like, is it just because she started anime with Sailor Moon? Is it this bad of a thing?
Right. Like, and that actually reminds me of like friend of the show, like Colleen, Manga Rex, manga recommendations, Colleen on YouTube. They are a prominent shoujo YouTuber. They talked about how people would call them a tourist.
Yeah. Oh, I mean,
as if they don't know anything about anime, and that wasn't the case.
No, for me too, I have a lot of haters online. I go by waves of harassment, and it goes always a bit above my head. But a common thing they say is like, I don't know what I'm talking about. And also because I can end up existing in those spaces that are not 100% like anime fandom. They just think I really don't know. Like, I remember a lot of them were talking to me about like Ken Akamatsu this summer, because I was saying like, is a far-right politician in Japan. I've read all of Lovina. I've read all of Negima. Like, I know what I'm talking about, and there's always this assumption I don't, which I think is just misogyny.
Yeah.
And so they do not scare me. But yeah, it's like, and I guess it's the same for Colleen. It's like always, it's a negative networking practice. Literally, it's like we're, and I'm sure, maybe you guys also live it to a lesser extent, or maybe to a bigger extent. But, it's like techniques that are, again, repeated again and again and again. And like people keep on telling you, you don't know what you're talking about. And at some point, you don't start to believe it, but you get tired and then you leave.
Yeah. I mean, I think that in our case, and Giana, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't feel as if we've had to deal with many haters.
Yeah, I guess because you're very niche in who you're targeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was intentional.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's just like, okay, Shoujo Sundae, we want it to be a safe space for all shoujo fans.
Mm-hmm.
And we really tend to not entertain the people that would come at us in a negative sense. I think, if anything, when we see other people dealing with haters like you or like Colleen, it's just like, oh, okay, this is another person to add to our block list because we're not going to give them the opportunity to attack us.
No,
yes.
Like,
and it's an advice, I can give for, any of your listener. It's like, do not entertain, block, you don't owe them anything. You don't owe them an explanation. Like, very often people contact me in bad faith and, ask me very biased questions always of like, do you want to ban anime? And I'm like, this is an insane question. Like,
Yeah.
and it's like, just don't answer if you feel like they're, have bad intention, block them, really. Like, don't.
Yeah. It does you so much better in the long run not to engage or give them the satisfaction.
Yeah, and it's like sometimes don't even read the full question. Like,
Exactly. Once you see where it's going, like you don't have to even finish reading
No,
it.
and it's like me, like some text me on like Twitter and everything, and I'm like, I just don't answer. I just delete the message. So this is a warning for.
Yes.
I'm like, stop messaging me.
Boundaries are so important, especially online.
No, and I know something else we've talked about with Megan Rose. I don't know if you know who she is. She works on Kawaii.
Yeah.
So I work on her on some project, and we often discuss, and like something we also are trying to be careful of is like, there's some actors on like, let's say anime Twitter who we know are operating in bad faith, and they're trying to present themselves as scholars without engaging with academic literature.
Yeah.
So a technique that we have is like, we don't really acknowledge them to this extent. We don't give them by also like not giving them too much room to breathe. I don't know if it's a good like metaphor, but basically we're not giving them the benefit of featuring them. Yeah, exactly. Of like featuring them in our research, talking, like giving them credits, because we know those people, they're like only operating on harassment of women, of like anybody who is like socially progressive in anime fandom. And I think it's just bad. And it's like, even Patrick Galbraith, who wrote very, in my opinion, questionable books. And that people often kind of use to like criticize me. Like, I know him and I know he doesn't agree with them. And I know he's willing to engage with ideas that are like different than him because he's an academic, and it's like part of the academic work. And when he publishes a work, it goes through a peer review process. And like, there is all of this. So that's a bit of like a technique we came up with.
Yeah. No, I think that that's a good technique as well. I think that a lot of people, when they're talking about anime, they're coming at it from a space where there's a lack of knowledge for them. They just know the anime that they're aware of. I don't think that they're getting into the history of it or seeing it from the academic point of view and stuff. And so in general, I think it is wild for people to attack you on something that it's like, you're going to school for this, you're writing on this, you're talking about this all of the time. But I also feel like that's just in line with misogyny in general, like of people telling you like, okay, even though you studied this is what I know about what you studied and I'm right, which doesn't make sense at all. Another question that I have, it's in relation to the paper, but you talk about how one of the first bigger like forums within Usenet was about Urusei Yatsura, which is written by Rumiko Takahashi, who is a female mangaka that is well known in the US for creating Inuyasha. It's interesting to me because that's like one of the bigger forums that people like created to talk about it, but it's made by a woman, but they don't want women in fandom spaces. So I wanted to just ask, like, why do you think that men during that time that used like Rex art anime were so keen on kicking out women from fandom spaces when they were enjoying work that was created by women in the first place?
Well, I think it's always a bit the excuse when you're like, oh, but I actually do engage with women work. I love I love Ranma and everything. And, I think to a lesser extent, I don't think those work were very progressive either. I think they very much reinforce like gender dynamics, and like heteronormativity and everything. and very like cute girl, moe. I think they were very attractive for the male audience at the time, but also for the female audience. Like I also grew up loving Rana.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think those work were not as progressive, and that's why this man did not necessarily like identify any kind of like progressive or social good with it. But,
Right. No, that makes sense.
you know, I think there were also like a part of those men that were like actively kicking out women, and like actively trying to things that like any kind of woman in anime fandom were necessarily a sign of a progressive arm that were gonna ruin everything. But I also think that there were some who just didn't really know better and didn't know what to do to actually protect women. Like, for example, the ones who were like, oh, this woman is a newcomer and she's trying to ruin everything. Maybe she was a newcomer, but maybe they should have thought, well, we don't have many women. Like, actually, kicking her out would be kicking one of the few. So, that's my opinion. That's my opinion!
No. I think that makes perfect sense. You're right in that, I guess with that specific work, Takahashi sensei was reinforcing the gender dynamics that they were sort of placing in this online setting in a way.
Yeah, I think it was just kind of an anime that wasn't challenging too much. So that was a very safe place that was made for, a male audience too.
I guess another question I have, I feel like you already sort of touched on this, but you mentioned the experience of Trish Ledoux, an employee of Viz Media, who was brutally harassed off of Rex Art Anime. And I think it's confusing to me because it's like, on the one hand, they were asking about where female anime fans were and saying that they should make themselves known. But then at the same time, here's somebody that not only is an anime fan, but is actually working within the industry, and then they end up harassing her off of the platform. And so why would they ask about where female anime fans are if they're just going to harass them off of the platform?
Yeah. I actually contacted, she just never went back to me, and that's fine. But I just wanted to let her know that I was working on a paper, and she was one of the person who I was talking about, and I was asking her to empathize, with what happened to you, and I don't think it was normal. But I respect that she doesn't want to have anything to do with any of this, or like this, era.
Right.
But yeah, I think, that she probably, like any of us, wasn't a perfect person, and that's really fine. And I'm sure that, like, as an employee to have some corporation that was really good, she probably made that lets people to be mad. Just like me, I would be mad at like a distribution company that was only publishing a certain kind of like always neglecting something. And and it was also the big movement when because Vice was getting bigger, they started to be very, very, very embarrassed. So she was like also part of this, those employees that were openly denouncing piracy and like denouncing initiative which fans didn't know. Then she was very open talking about feminism in Animerama, and I'm sure it didn't got her, friends and more like enemies. This is another movie.
Yeah.
And the other number is, in those hyper-gendered, constructed as an environment, to gain visibility actually leads very often to harassment instead of like recognition. And we see with like a lot of women in sport and everything would just get more harassed. Or like YouTubers, try to have like a mainstream audience and not just paying for like a female audience, and they could just end up being harassed. And it's always like, the problem of like either you become invisible or you become hyper-visible, and we see it with politics, we just talk about it. I'm sure it's like one of the biggest, YouTuber who talks about manga, and like they end up just being harassed a lot. It's like, it's like visibility does not protect.
It's kind of scary to note that even within your research, just how long basically male anime fans have essentially been trolling, or like they called it flamethrowing from your research, just how prominent it was back then, and then now it's still something that's relevant now, which I know we sort of already, I think you already partially answered this question.
Yeah.
Well, you not even partially, but like based on your research, then how should female or femme presenting anime fans combat such behavior, like combat that trolling?
Well, it's, because I talked a lot about before, I have to talk about positive network. And, like this podcast, for example, and I talk about you, and, and I talk about initiatives that I consider to be for like more progressive and social in anime study, in like anime studies and anime fandom, because that's how we kind of like break the network. You know, the negative network exists in itself, and we can come from the inside and open this, you know, let's say positive and negative network, like are not insular to each other, like we exist in the same online spaces and everything. But it's like to branching out, to doing education, is it distributors, it means, you know, publishing more manga and, you know, for like a fan that has sense of streaming platform, like to actually announce it as a market, create those narratives. Anime fandom just looks like something that is not accurate.
Yeah. I can't believe, Gianna, I can't believe, we're thesis
I know.
officials.
I'm like still processing that. Wow.
Wow.
I never knew.
This is a bigger deal than us being in Dexterto last year.
Right? Oh my god.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Well,
Wow. Yes. Positive networking, guys. We can make spaces for ourselves.
exactly. Like literally making spaces, you know, like as you guys are doing, it's like talking about subjects that you like, but also inviting people who have different perspectives. I know a lot of the, you know, the people in like the anime world, like the more official institutional anime world, they know who I am. They never really invited me anyway. And it's you know, by like voicing perspective, and you know, of course, yeah, like yourself inviting people from the podcast, and, you know, people like Avery on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I really like, you know, what she posts, and she also gets harassed so much.
Yeah. It's too much.
And like, I mean, I follow her, and she doesn't post, you know, anything. So like, we get harassed apart from like really talking about specific genre.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like, you know, my thing is myself, but I bring it back to now just to show that not a lot has changed. If my paper could be on Twitter right now, and that's what I thought is sad. Is I could have found like an anime forum from like 2010 with the same problem and the same.
I do want to say, like, before your research, I had never heard of Anne Schubert or Schubert and her role in creating online anime fandom. I guess her role also in like Rex art anime. And I think it's criminal how she and the other women that you graciously listed in your paper, I think it's criminal how they had such a big impact on anime spaces. And outside of I just never heard of them before, I guess, because of this negative networking and this erasure. So I wanted to just, I mean, and not even just me, I'm sure like me and Gianna, we wanted to thank you for taking the time in creating this work and giving not only just like a voice, but a name to like these women that created what we're seeing now, or at least creating these spaces, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was important for me. I feel like when you focus so much on negativity, like, you know, I feel like I'm a hater, and I'm like the Kermit meme when he has a hoodie and he's like, I thrive off negativity. And I was like, okay, I also want to acknowledge, like, you know, and also because Jamal was doing my thing, I'm like, I want it for so many women. And I'm like, it's like 9 or 40, and like, even for me to find their name, to look for them, it's like, it was so laborious. I want to make sure they're rich. And, you know, of course, it's like, you know, I cannot cite everybody. After some people reached out to me and they were like, oh, I was part of the person archive. And, you know, of course, I'm going to thesis. But yeah, it's like, I was like, it's so important. I never heard too of Anne Schubert. I actually heard about her for the first time. That's not exist, and people in the comments. But of course, you know, our mother is Anne Schubert.
Yeah.
And yeah, you know, she's like, and I'm sure some fans would remember her, but she just never got, you know,
the recognition.
Yeah, like people really like. I know Stephen Pearl is like talked about it a lot. It's called, you know, the American Otaku, and she never got this title.
Yeah, which is like kind of madness because of the fact that like you noted that she had a stroke, and then everybody was doing crowdfund. So this is like the first instance of crowdfunding that I had ever seen. Like, you know, like before GoFundMe and all of that existed, you guys, people were crowdfunding to help with medical bills and stuff. And Anne Schubert was one of the people that they did it for, but nobody really knows about her. Yeah. Just kind of insane.
And she was, I mean, I think especially in the 90s, like, people were very, you know, she was more recognized because people who were, you know, anime fandom was just a smaller community. A lot of people just knew her because they used to know her, like, physically and, like, in person, and work with her. You know, she also worked in tech, which I found so interesting. It's like, the reason why she decided to went online, because she had access to those networks that were very much reserved to like computer science students, people who were working in like technology and everything, like because it's only like Usenet, so the technology that was using breakout anime, Usenet only kind of reached a more mainstream audience in the mid 90s, but her in the late 80s, she was already on it, and she only needed like 10 votes or something like this to open the group. Like she needed 10 people to physically click to say, yes, let's do this.
Where can the people who are listening find your paper, Do Female Anime Fans Exist?
Well, so I know it got featured in some conference, which mainly it was open access for a bit, but I'm sure by the time the article come out, it won't be. But so if you have an academic access or like through your institution, you can find it in the journal Internet Histories. And if not, I've published a free version on my ResearchGate. And so you would find it, you would find it online. I have linked it on my Twitter profile. I have a website too, and there is a link, so you can find it. And worst case scenario, send me an email, send me a DM, and I would send it to you.
Yes, because that's how we were able to read it as well. We DM'd you. We were just like,
Yes.
Please, Aurélie, please, let us read this.
No, it was.
Yes.
I hate this, function of academic publishing when like they put everything behind a paywall. So I mean, it took me one day after publication to be like, I'm putting it for free online. They can contact me.
Yeah. Okay. Switching gears from talking about your paper, we wanted to ask you, before we even get into the review, what are your overall feelings on Belladonna of Sadness?
Well, so as I say, like I work a lot on pornographic animation. So I had like seen pieces of the movie here and there. Like, I have some archive about it, but I've really like watched it seriously from beginning to end right now. And I know people kept on telling me, "Oh, you work in pornography, you should watch this." But I was like, I'm pretty sure it's a movie about sexual life, and like I don't think this is. I've always been very interested about Belladonna of Sadness, of people trying to present it as a pornographic or like erotic movie, when to me it wasn't the case at all. I didn't see any erotic power, pornographic power. It's a movie about like a woman and like society expectations of her, and how like sexuality end up being weaponized, but also she take it back. I'm like, this is not the pornographic animated movie people are trying to present it as.
No, it's definitely not. I agree with that. It's definitely a lot. There's actually so many layers to this film.
Now, what did you guys think?
But yeah, I guess it was a hard watch.
Yes, for many reasons, it was a difficult watch. I guess I don't know if we should say more with getting into all of our points coming up.
True. But I will say at least that it was a hard watch. I think there were parts of it, like aesthetically, if you're not thinking about the subject matter of it, it's very pretty.
Yes.
It's extremely...
one of the most beautiful movies I've seen.
Yeah. I've never seen an anime like this at all.
Me neither.
So it stands out because of how different it is. I know it's like taking on like modernist art style.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know why it is how it is? Like why it's so many like fixed images?
No.
It's because they didn't have money.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I know they went bankrupt.
Yeah, it was multi-production.
Yeah.
They had done The 1001 Night. They had done Cleopatra. Both were not successes. And Osamu Tezuka had left the studio at the time before even they started to do Belladonna. They just didn't have money anymore.
Yeah.
So it kind of became this like avant-garde film. Very experimental. But I mean, even at such a limited release, it didn't make any money. So.
But I mean, in spite of all of it, it's still beautiful. And like, it's beautiful. It's hard. It's a hard film, but it's a beautiful film. It reminds me of like, actually my feelings of, which this is not an anime film. I mean, it's obviously not, of 12 Years a Slave. Like I watched that and I was just like, this might be the only time that I watched this, but it's a masterpiece. But wow, it's a hot, like, yeah. But let's get into, I guess, listeners who are unable to listen to us further talk about this film because of the subject matter, we will see you in our next episode. Thank you so much for listening to this. Please support Aurélie on Twitter, her website. Definitely go check out Do Female Anime Fans Exist? We are going to get into the film now. Before we get into the hard serve summary, because guys, I wanted to do my best in telling you the plot of the film so that we could kind of get into like our analysis of it later. Before we even get into that, I have introduced this section that we kind of had in the beginning of our podcast, which is, I guess, technically the background of the film. So the late Ichie Yamamoto directed Belladonna of Sadness for Mushi Productions' Animerama trilogy, which the great Osamu Tezuka produced. The film is based on the 1862 book Satanism and Witchcraft by Jules Michel. Belladonna of Sadness was released in 1973 and considered a commercial failure. However, it grew a cult following years later. Mick Gaw, a staff writer for Washington Square News, describes the film as elegant watercolor vignettes of medieval life, reminiscent of Gothic-stained glass paintings, are juxtaposed by explosive animated sequences of sexual violence, feudal oppression, and moral depravity. Discotheque Media announced that they got the license for Belladonna of Sadness late last year and will be releasing it this year in 2024. If you like our review or enjoyed the film in the past, please consider picking up the Blu-ray once it's released. This film is definitely out of the ordinary for Shoujo Sundae. Still, Giana and I felt it was necessary to touch on historic pieces of Japanese cinema, and what better time to start that than Women's History Month. So here we are. Okay, so let's get into this hard serve summary. I'll do my best. I'll probably be talking a lot, so my bad.
No, not your bad. You're allowed to talk. It's our podcast. You're a host. You can talk all you want.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So basically, here's our hard serve. It's not soft. This is a long summary, y'all. You've been warned. Here's our hard serve summary of Belladonna of Sadness. Jeanne and Jeanne go to their feudal lord and lady to ask for permission to be married. Jeanne informs the lord that they sold their only milking cow to arrange a dowry. The lord unreasonably asks for 10 milking cows, to which both Jeanne and Jeanne plead for mercy. The feudal lady asks if Jeanne is chaste, and Jeanne asserts that she is and that their marriage is pure. The lady then orders the men in residence to enjoy Jeanne. Jeanne is chased out of the castle by men depicted as ghouls. Once he's out of the castle, Jeanne is violently gang raped all night. In the morning, Jeanne comes out of the castle, bleeding between her legs and crying to Jeanne about what happened to her. Jeanne says to forget what happened, and life for them begins now, but Jeanne is overcome with her grief. At first, he comforts her, but then he suddenly begins choking Jeanne until he realizes what he's doing and runs home crying. Jeanne returns home and washes the remnants of her torn wedding dress. A devil appears from her spindle and tells Jeanne it is part of her. It manifested from her spirit crying out to be saved and for power, even if it meant giving up her soul. At first, it makes her laugh, then moan, then cry. Jeanne tells the devil she will do anything to make sure her husband, Jean, does not die a miserable death. Soon, only Jeanne and Jean are able to make money in their town. Jean is the only villager able to pay the high taxes, and the Lord makes him a tax collector. Their station in the town changes because of this, and the villagers bow down to them. A war breaks out, and Jean has his hand cut off for not having enough money to give the feudal lord to fund it. He then gets 3 days to collect the remaining taxes, or he will be hanged. Jeanne meets with the devil again for help, but refuses to give the devil her soul, saying it's for God and for Jean. Nevertheless, she decides to give up her body instead. The devil ends up raping her in order for her to try to save Jean. Afterward, Jeanne cries and Jeanne is holding her until she comes back to her senses. She goes into town and begins collecting taxes from the wealthy moneylender who deems her as being possessed by the devil. The feudal lord and conscripted soldiers leave for war, leaving the women behind. While the men are gone, Jeanne becomes a moneylender in town, and the feudal lady becomes jealous of her power. Jeanne is still alive, but is no longer who he once was. He gets drunk every day and wanders around town. Many years pass, and the feudal lord returns after the war ends, and his lady tells him that Jeanne is respected more than him. The queen's page cuts Jeanne's clothes, and the returned male villagers chase after her. Jeanne makes it back home and bangs at the door, but Jeanne refuses to open it. The villagers subsequently beat Jeanne, and the feudal lady asks for Jeanne to be burned at the stake. But her page cautions that Jeanne be kept in the dungeon instead because burning her alive will leave the devil intact with her soul. So they order for Jeanne to be arrested and plan to have her soul accept Christianity to get rid of the devil. Soldiers go to her home as Jeanne watches from the bushes. She hides from them and her husband in the wilderness. Once more, the devil shows up as a larger-than-life being, ready to take Jeanne as his own after her husband abandons her. Jeanne yells at him for causing all of her pain, and the devil agrees that he did, but he quote-unquote saves her as well. He craves souls crushed by the weight of despair that curses God, and Jeanne is one of them now. The devil calls Jeanne his bride and asks for what she wants in return, to which she says anything as long as it's bad. He laughs, and then they have disturbing sexual relations. While in the forest, Jeanne becomes a witch and one with nature, and during this time, her beauty continues to grow. Seasons pass, and Jeanne is back to being a regular farmer. Suddenly, the bubonic plague ensnares the town. Jeanne saves one villager named Michael with Belladonna. It is a poison capable of healing. Villagers then go to Jeanne and party with her every night to the dismay of the feudal lord and lady. The villagers begin to transform into animalistic demons as Jeanne hugs her devil husband. Villagers testify how Jeanne helped them to the feudal lord and lady, and the feudal lady's page later goes to Jeanne to help fulfill his love for the feudal lady. He gets belladonna from Jeanne and puts it in the feudal lady's drink. They have sex, but then the feudal lord kills them both. In the guise of coming together again, Jeanne meets Jeanne once more and asks Jeanne to come to the castle with him. He says that the lord wants to join forces with her. Jeanne is skeptical, but then Jeanne and Jeanne have sex, and then they go to the castle together. The Lord asks Jeanne to tell everyone how to use belladonna, and he will promise her wealth, land, and possibly a noble title. Jeanne asks for the entire world, and the Lord orders for her to be burned at the stake. Jeanne turns his back towards her as she's led to her death, hurting Jeanne in the process. But at the very last moment, Jeanne takes the fire meant to start Jeanne's death and throws it at the Lord in defiance. He then gets stabbed to death by the Lord's soldiers. The villagers protested but stopped once faced with spears by the soldiers. Then Jeanne gets burned, and as she dies, one by one, the villagers' faces change into hers. The last thing we see as a result of Jeanne's death is that her spirit is theorized to have caused the French Revolution. And that is our hard serve summary.
Nice job, Chika. You did it.
Thank you, Olga. Thank you so much. Man, that was a struggle. Okay, so Giana, do you have a theme for Belladonna of Sadness?
So the theme came to me literally like before I even watched the film. Like I knew after like you read the initial synopsis to me, it's that old quote, the hell hath no fury, like a woman scorned.
Yes, I had that as a theme as well.
Verbatim.
Yes.
I love that.
Just, twinning. Yeah. Okay, Aurélie, what is your theme for this film?
You know, it has a main thing with like female anger and everything. I think it's the almost not the last scene, but like the second to last scene when all the women get her face, and it's like we are plurals. It's like in suffering we're not alone, and it was very powerful for me to see that
all those women, like the idea of Jeanne being produced and like the woman taking her face as if like her experience was not this singular, like witch, but actually something that anybody could go through.
Yeah, that definitely fits. I feel like besides Hell Hath No Fury Like a Woman Scorned, I also had I had Never Trust a Man. But I mean, you can trust some of them, okay? Here's your qualifier, people. Because I know that there are men that support our podcast.
Yes.
And aren't like trash human beings. So like, you don't have to trust all men. You can trust some of them, but really, honestly, just never really trust a man. It is what it is.
The ones that give you a reason to trust.
Right. And then I also just had like beauty kills.
Oh.
Because I feel like in the film, there's just this reassertion of Jeanne's beauty, like all of the time, to the point that like when she does become one with the devil and she's living in the wilderness, she just assumed that she was going to turn ugly. She kind of wanted that in a way because her experience of being beautiful has really only been negative. But instead, I think the devil said, like, why does anger or hatred have to be ugly?
Yeah.
Which was something to think about. But yeah, okay.
Well, yeah, so I know the idea of the beautiful monster is like very popular. Like I'm not a big fan of like horror and everything, but I know like Jennifer's Body.
Okay.
It's like a good example of it, of like a woman like just after suffering so much, like getting becoming a demon almost.
Yeah, it's actually like kind of parallel too.
I know.
The more I thought about it, I was like, wait a minute.
Ooh, okay. Shout out to Megan Fox.
Yes, queen.
Okay, let's move into Sprinkle on Top. Aurélie, do you have any symbolism, I guess, from the film that you noticed?
The image that like really shocked me the most, well, not shocked me, but when I was like, oh, it's really something I didn't expect, to have like all those faces in the crowd of those ordinary villagers, becoming Jeanne. I kind of thought, oh, it's gonna be this like extraordinary story about this one woman who is so beautiful and then she become a witch. But then it's almost at the end, it's almost saying actually she was also a common person, and like her trauma made her the symbol, and in the movie gave her this power. But in the end, like what she went through, which is like sexual abuse, to be let down by men, to be abused by like higher power, to be accused of witchcraft, could have happened to any of those other women. It's like it's a movie, but like the metaphor of the devil is also very much like suddenly being connected to sexuality. Being told that like you're a witch, when we knew like the idea of women being witches was very much any woman who was not like perfectly like calm and feminine and everything was a witch. So
yeah, and then there were people, if you didn't even like another woman, just like how the feudal lady didn't like Jeanne, then she would be accused of being a witch.
Yeah.
Without having done anything.
Right. She was jealous and all of a sudden she was possessed by the devil.
Yeah.
It's technically Jeanne like hasn't like up until a certain point in the movie and even hasn't really done anything apart from being abused and being told that she was things and then helping people.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, like she really, all she did was help people. It was very sad. Like it was a cyclical thing.
Does she even have powers? We don't even
know.
She just she finds herbs and like she makes potions.
Right. It wasn't really clear if she had like any supernatural abilities or if it was just like herbalism.
Yeah.
Right.
Or even if like the devil really existed or just
right.
Like her going through sexual abuse and then having a confusing relationship to her own sexuality, people having assumptions about her, creating this narrative, and and her then having hallucinations and everything. It's like, it was really crazy.
Giana, what is your sprinkle on top or sprinkles on top if you have more than one?
I just have one. I want to be honest up front. I was definitely just experiencing this film. I could probably get into more why, and I have like a controversial take in my hot fudge perhaps about it. But yeah, so I do have a sprinkle on top though. So I remember when The little devil appears as a sprite at the beginning. He says that she has the power to like make him grow. And then we learn later that he thrives off of sadness and despair and like rejecting God. And the more that she did those things, as her sadness grew, the size of the devil grew as well.
Yeah. I have a number of things. I'll even start off with just the name Belladonna of Sadness. Belladonna is an herb. Like, we also see it used in the film. Belladonna is a poisonous plant. It's also called deadly nightshade, and it can cause paralysis, severe hallucinations, delirium, confusion, convulsions, and also death. And so besides that, Belladonna also means beautiful lady in Italian. So it's like the name of the film could be interpreted as, okay, beautiful lady of sadness, which goes back to Jeanne, but then also like, I guess, sort of like the poison of sadness.
Yeah.
And sort of how like this sadness of what happened to Jeanne infected her life and the lives of so many other like people, that everyone was sort of poisoned by it, you know?
Yeah. Very good observation. I really like that.
Thank you. You know, I try. I'll also note that the song, I guess the opening song, which I mean, there is an overall score and stuff. I think it's available now, of Belladonna of Sadness, but the song Belladonna of Sadness by Mayumi Tachibana is the opening, and I feel like it sort of describes the story of Jeanne. Like, it doesn't specifically name Jeanne, but it describes like the sadness, and it also mentions like part of the watercolor imagery. Like, they talked about blushes and about, I think, blues as well and stuff. So I thought that that was interesting to note, like, within its lyrics. Aurélie, do you have any other sprinkles on top? I think I have 2 left.
No, I mean, I really agree with these double readings that you're doing of the title. I'm like, I don't think she's doing anything bad. I'm very like, she's a working class icon, she's on the side of the people. And like, it's really the framing of her as like this evil demonic figure who, hasn't done, apart from like deciding to leave society, has really done nothing wrong. And even the Belladonna, like, she's using it for good, which of course is contrasted with her saying like, I want to do something bad.
Right.
It's like, even when she said that she wanted something bad to happen when she talked to the devil and then the plague came, she was still fixing it. So it's like, how bad could it be? Like, I mean, I know people died, but still, like, it's like,
how bad could the plague be,
I'm like, again, I got lost a lot of times watching this. Are we to blame her for the Black Plague?
No, I don't think people were washing, right? Wasn't that like, I mean, when it comes to the actual like Black Plague and stuff, one of the reasons why people were getting it was because of how unhygienic they were.
Yeah.
So technically, I would say that it's not really her fault. They were just dirty.
And I think, we can make space for people who go through like sexual abuse to have sort of conflicting relationship about their, like the people who cause them. And, she would be very entitled to have like very strong emotions that are not really rational, that maybe she's not going to follow through on, to say that even strong feeling, like I want to hurt them, doesn't really mean she's going to hurt them.
Yeah.
But like, I think it's actually very,
normal,
realistic and like normal portrayal of someone going through this kind of event. And it's like, she's not like the perfect victim, because no one really is.
No.
The 2 remaining sprinkles on top that I had, one was that when Jeanne, I guess, was becoming one with nature and like starting to become a witch and learn how to use Belladonna, she talked about how she thought she was going to be ugly and how her hair, she assumed that her hair was going to turn into venomous snakes. And I thought that that was a callback to Greek mythology in the story of Medusa. Which there are many iterations of what Medusa's story is, but I guess to sort of fit what I'm talking about, it's like Medusa is seduced by the god Poseidon or Neptune in Athena's temple and is punished by Athena and thereby like turned into a gorgon, and her hair turns into snakes, she gets wings, and she has the ability to turn men into stone. But in any case, I was just like, oh, you know, like here's another like victim. Because like some people say that she was seduced. Other people say that she was assaulted by Poseidon. So it's like it could really go either way. I think the last sprinkle that I had is just that Jeanne and the villagers dancing in a circle. I think it like once they were getting the belladonna from her while the plague was happening, I felt that them dancing in circles with one another the way that they were doing, it just reminded me that the whole film in and of itself is a cycle of something bad happening to Jeanne and then her going to the devil to fix it, and then sort of being helpful to people, and then something bad happens to her again, and it just seemed to happen over and over. So
Negative network.
Yeah.
negative
Bring it
network.
back.
Yes. Yes. But yeah, okay. So let's move into Floats Your Boat. So Gianna, do you have any Floats Your Boat?
I was only able to record one, but I'm sure I will bounce off of what you guys are saying.
Of us. Yeah. Yeah.
And we already kind of touched on the art being so unique. I was just taking in every frame. It was just so interesting to look at. And like in particular, I was captivated by Jeanne's beauty throughout the whole film. Like she was drawn so gorgeously.
Yeah. Even when they drew her a little bit differently, like, you know, her hair would change color,
Yeah.
her nipples would be changing color, like everything was changing, color. But regardless, she was constantly like beautiful throughout it. Aurélie, what is one of your Floats Your Boat or one of your lakes?
Yeah. Well, of course, yeah, like the aesthetic of the movie is just really beautiful. It made me think a lot of, correct me if I'm not saying her name right, like Moyoko Ano. She's like a mangaka. She did like a Sugar Run.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Listen, I have my good girl Google out. I was like, who? Okay, yes. Yeah, I see it. I see it.
No, it made me feel
The
like,
art does remind me of her stuff. Yeah.
about a lot also of like Paradise Kiss. Just so beautiful. There were really moments when I was like, oh, I want to do a screenshot. And then I was like, this is a terrible story.
Right, I thought the same thing. I was like, wow, like what a gorgeous drawing of her. I should take a screenshot.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, maybe I don't want to think about this story in like the near future or the future.
Yeah. And also I was like, we don't have beautiful movies like this anymore. You know, why does the only like movie like this that is almost like JoJo, like from an aesthetic point of view and everything, or like Jose mostly, has to be like this horrible story.
Right.
Justice, I'm like, I want also to make a movie with only static images.
Yeah. I want it to be different. I feel like a lot of anime now, at least that people see, it just looks the same. And I know that they're adapting the art style of the mangaka, so it's not like they can make it exactly, like look exactly the way that the mangaka would have it. But I wish there was a little bit more effort because it just feels like we're seeing the same faces, but it's like different stories, different coloring and stuff. But with this, it's so unique and pretty. It's just that the story is very difficult to like take in at the same time. Something that I liked was, and this is just at the very beginning, Jeanne's assertion of Jeanne's innocence when they were trying to get married, like talking about how it's pure. I mean, they were pleading to get married, and you would think that, oh, like these two innocent people, their love is so strong and it was so sweet.
It was, yeah.
Until it wasn't.
Yeah.
And it was just, yeah. So I felt so bad because it was just, you're asking this and I guess it wouldn't have really mattered to them. Like the result would have been the same. But I guess one of the few times where you see him sort of protecting her in that moment, I was just like, oh, okay, yeah, I like that. He should do that more.
Yes.
But
keep that energy,
He had many
Jeanne.
occasions. Yeah.
yeah. What else did you like, Aurélie?
I really liked, as you say, like kind of the cycle and to see this evolution of Jeanne. Like, I think it would have been very easy from the beginning to make her go see the devil. And actually, I was surprised when she rejected him like a couple of times before
Yeah.
Me too.
kind of being forced to it, and being put like to this last resort. And so yeah, I liked it. I like the fact that, as I said before, like I feel like it's a pretty honest, depiction of someone going through this kind of event. In the sense, it doesn't try to portray her as perfect. It doesn't try to pretend that like suddenly she's like forgiving or she's moving on, or because she's helping the villagers that like no, she's also gonna like help the king, for example. Like she's still able to differentiate who she's kind of investing energy in, and at the same time that like she's very she's still connected to her human side, and like when Jean comes back at the end, she's still very drawn to him and everything.
Yeah, I think honestly that is very beautiful to just see that, despite the fact, because honestly, I think after that first gang rape, like at that point when the devil came out, I was just like, oh, he would have been big devil at that point for me, because it's just like, that happened to her. Then her husband, technically, like Jeanne chokes her, and it's just like, that was so dark. And for her to still have that love for him, I mean, I guess she also could see the fact, like, it's not like he really consciously did that on purpose. Once he came to, he couldn't believe what he did and he ran off crying. But she still, even after all of that, was just like, oh, I want to help Jeanne. Then the next time, she wants to help Jeanne so that, like, he doesn't get hanged. And then even the last time, it's like, she says no to the feudal lord, but she still goes to the castle because that's what he wanted. I think her belief in him, or her desire to stay in that love, I guess, that she previously had for him, is really admirable.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest, I don't really have that much more. I think I could probably combine I think I could combine like 2 different points, but
the categories, they work better for like a JoJo anime for like fruit
for real,
basket.
then for this.
Yeah.
This is so hard. It's just like I'm trying to find likes, but
It's like, okay, who was your favorite character?
I think I'll just merge all of these. So, okay, so at the end, right, or near the end, when the feudal lord and lady were hearing the testimonies, I thought it was really just nice to see how these 3 different sets of villagers talked about how Jeanne helped them. So it was like, oh, I was in pain. My wife was having labor pains and Jeanne was able to help me. Or then the other villager was talking about how she didn't want to have any more children, but she was lonely and she still wanted to be with her husband. And then Jeanne was able to help them with that as well. Even the last villager was talking about how she lost her grandson, and then they were trying to use that to pin Jeanne as being a witch. Like, she made somebody come back from the dead, and it was just like, no. But I saw somebody else crying out for my dead grandson, and that made me feel better, which I feel like at that point that 3rd villager was hallucinating off of the Belladonna.
Yeah.
Because that's like one of the symptoms of it, but still.
Right. Didn't
like,
she say she saw like the fires of hell screaming his name? And they're like, you're satisfied with this conclusion? And she's like, I'm the happiest I've ever been. I'm like, whatever works for you, miss.
Yeah.
Right.
And again, like we don't even know if maybe she just, they keep on associating Jeanne with a demon, and maybe she just saw Jeanne being sad about it.
Right.
Right. She just saw Jeanne reacting to it, but the Belladonna made her hallucinate and be like, it was the fires of hell. Like, but at least somebody was crying for my grandson. So,
But the same way as as a woman basically looking for like contraception.
Yeah. Right, because like nobody wants to keep giving birth, especially during a bubonic plague.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Like,
this is a time before epidurals.
For real, that would not be on my priority list. Because like, how are you going to give birth and things are randomly growing on you? Just no. The last like that I have is just Jeanne helping Jeanne at the very last moment and throwing the fire at the Lord and stuff.
Yeah.
Because the whole time you kind of just see him staring at her and acting as if she's just this other being. And so low-key, like when Jeanne was hurt, I was hurt too. Because I was just like, do you know everything that she sacrificed?
Right.
For you to be looking at her in this crowd and like turning away from her. And so even though it was like a small rebellion, I was still like happy that he at least did something or felt enough to like stand up for her at the very end. Because like I think that it at least partially validated a little. I say partially, not fully, because like I mean he wasn't that helpful, but it partially validated why she loved him at least a lot in the beginning. So well, let's move into Banana Split.
I have one extremely light banana split to maybe lighten the mood.
Okay.
So my nitpick is just the names, Jeanne and Jeanne. They're so similar. Like, it's so easy. Like, we've been tripping over them the whole time. So, just, I feel like some kind of, I can't think of a word. My brain's fried. I'm so sorry. Something to keep them a little more unique from each other, I think would have been helpful.
It's funny that you say this because in French, those names don't sound similar.
Oh, okay.
It's like if I hear someone talk, like I would absolutely know
the difference.
Like the difference. Like it's not confusing for me, for example.
Okay.
But like, yeah, I acknowledge that like for an Anglophone, it is.
It's because I'm sorry. I know Giana thankfully edited out, but it was seriously kicking my ass.
I will take care of it.
It was like I needed support. I was like, I gotta say this a couple of times, even in the middle of this summary. Like, wait, am I doing? Yeah.
Talking about Jean, I'm not a Jean apologist.
Yeah.
I think that's the same. I think I was, as I understand it's like part of the plot. I think as a viewer, I felt confused about how I was, I'm gonna say how I was supposed to feel about him, but I'm sure I was supposed to feel however I'm supposed to be feeling. There is not like directors and like, filmmakers do not expect you to feel one thing. But yeah, it's a very flawed character. We don't really see him supportive. At some point he disappears. You kind of think that like Jeanne is just doing her life, with the devil and everything. And it doesn't really, like up until, for me, when he come at the end and he's like, oh, this is they're going to kill you. And then right after he say, and this is they're going to kill me too. I'm like, is it the only reason why you're here?
Because of her?
Well, because you think that you're going to die too. It's like, again, like
that's
a selfish point. Yeah. It's like that's why he would come back and only like come look for her. It's not out of love, but like out of selfishness. And
yeah,
I was like, no. I was like, you can run to the flame at the end, but
Yeah, I thought for a minute too that she was gonna realize that, but I think she was just so blinded by her previous love for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was still, a beautiful scene and like beautiful and like realistic too, that like someone that she was so in love with, she's not just gonna,
give
cut
up
ties.
on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Especially when you say like, they're gonna kill me.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end, we're not sure what happened to her because she's like this human, like I don't know if fire can kill her.
Right. At the very beginning, when the feudal lady wanted to burn Jeanne at the stake, then the page said you can't just burn her at the stake because if her soul is one with the devil, like it's still gonna exist.
Yeah.
And so that's why they're like, oh, we need to arrest her and bring her back to Christianity or whatnot. But then the page and the feudal lady were dead by that point. So, by the end of it, I feel like, she was burnt to death, but her soul being tied with the devil was like intact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least that's how I like saw it.
I was thinking that too, because I didn't forget what the page had said.
One thing I had, which is kind of random, is just that I had never heard of green being the color of the devil before this film.
Me neither. I was thinking that too.
But I think it's the color of money, no?
Yeah, it's like the color. I think it's just in relation to greed and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, it makes sense. It's just that I never had seen it. It's more of like when you think of the devil, you think of reds and stuff. Which, we still do see red in the film, but I was just like, that gave me pause when I saw it.
Yeah.
Right, like why wasn't the devil drawn green then?
For real.
Maybe it just shows their misconceptions of it.
I also think, I don't think she was dressed. They were not saying green is really, the color of the devil as much as it was just the color of power.
Yeah.
You know? Which is maybe also like a hint that like what she's getting from the devil is actually not power. You know, like not this, either like the superficial power or not real power. You know, she's still like dependent on someone. You know, she went through like a lot of abuse to get there.
Yeah.
She's not girl bossing her way through it.
No,
Actually,
definitely.
she is more than a lot of us.
But yeah. It's kind of like, I feel her even being tied to the devil. It's like, I don't even think it's really her asking for power. I feel like it's more so the devil doing these weird check-ins to see if she's broken yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it makes it easier for, like, if all these random people being like, oh, she's possessed by the devil. It's like the slowest rumor mill of, oh, she's possessed. And it's like, you just don't like her. Or you're just mad you had to give over money or whatever.
It's like we don't talk about Bruno.
Definitely.
It's the same thing. It's like constructing, you know, an evil person. Well, of course it's different, but...
Yeah. No, I get where you were going with it. Yeah. Another thing that I have as Banana Split is just, to be honest, and it's like, I am in no way blaming Jeanne or Jeanne, but my thing is, when that war happened, I would have skipped town. Like, let me go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, I kind of wish that they had tried at least, like, because they were gone, like the feudal lord was gone for years. And so it's just kind of like, okay, you know, build up your little nest egg and then just go somewhere else. Like,
I mean, nothing really said that they couldn't leave, so I'm surprised nobody attempted.
I guess because even, you know, they say that like Jeanne was helping the villagers and everything, and, you know, she became this powerful figure. But we don't see a lot of like traces of this power afterward. You know, then like when she disappears and when she goes like to the nature, it's like up until someone randomly stumbled upon her and she helps them. Like no one went to look for her.
Yeah.
yeah.
And people don't come back to her because they thought she was like this powerful or like helpful person, but because they were like, oh, she can actually give us something that we need. It felt like she was, you know, pretty used throughout the movie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or you know what? Maybe the reason why they didn't leave, which I guess this is a crazy pun that ties into it, but it's like dealing with the devil you know versus what you don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
Something is, you know, we don't know how isolated they were. We don't know how much they knew about other places.
Yeah.
It's a war. It's like you're gonna leave your, you know, your relatively safe place, and maybe you're surrounded by enemies. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it could get worse.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody have any last banana split? I think I have one more.
I do not.
I do not, but, you know, maybe I would jump on your last point.
Okay. So the last point that I have, it's in relation to when Jeanne, her soul is consumed by the devil. This is after Jeanne didn't let her back into the house and she was like hiding in the wilderness. And then the devil comes back and was like, oh, you're going to be my bride. And so then they start having like the disturbing sex scene. So like during this sex scene, right, all of a sudden we start seeing really random 70s elements that just start showing up. So it's like,
right,
you see clowns, you see money, you see random buildings, hand puppets, maps, ships, a random samurai, a TV, the pyramids in Egypt. Like, it was just a lot of things, which at that point I was just kind of like, it mildly took me out because I was just like, what? Because, you know, before it was just, okay, like the setting is medieval and that's the vibes they were giving off of. And then suddenly it's like, we're in the 70s now.
Yeah.
And so that partially took me out of it. But I guess because of the fact that the title of the film is Belladonna and it's supposed to make people hallucinate stuff, then maybe that's what they were insinuating, or I don't know.
I think the stuff that we talk about, how they also, you know, like this kind of edits, of course, like it's a creative choice, but it can also be an economic choice.
Yeah.
which is like,
right.
it was already like such limited animation. And then there is this, hallucination. And like, instead of doing a lot of like very complex animation, you can do a lot of drawings and, like small drawings, and you're going to show them very, very fast. That's like a way of doing it, I guess.
Yeah, like to fill in the fact that they didn't have enough money to do more. Then it's like, okay, what are some things we can easily put in this scene?
And then it's like, it's very reflective of the time. Like the movie, I think, was like in 70, yeah?
Yeah, in 1973.
Yeah, it's like, it's very much like the aesthetic of the time. It's very Western, but yeah. It's like, all those like psychedelic movies, which, have you watched Cleopatra?
Oh, I haven't watched
Me
it
neither.
yet.
It's like an anachronist retelling of like Cleopatra, basically. So
Interesting. We might check that out, guys. We'll see.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Let's move into Rocky Road, which is basically scenes that were very sad or made us emotional or cry.
Oh, where to start?
Where to start is the whole film. But it's like, I mean, even just at the my first point was just when Jeanne is being gang raped, and then like, this is why this is so crazy to me, because like, she's literally being torn apart by this. Like, they're depicting it because it's like, it's tearing apart like her soul, who she is as a person, but you're literally seeing her being split apart. And if you guys have ever, like, you don't, and it doesn't have to be, I definitely wouldn't wish that on anybody. Nobody, I don't want anybody to ever be raped. But this is not what I mean by this specifically. If you've ever hurt yourself, right? Not even you hurting yourself, like you could, like somebody could hit you, or you fell down, or you accidentally like cut your hand and stuff when you were like cooking. When you hurt yourself, that pain or the wound, it feels like a heartbeat.
Yes.
Right? And that's essentially what I was getting at. It was like, when you see Jeanne being raped, the rape, it looks like a literal heartbeat between her legs. And that made me it was a lot. I felt so badly for her. I mean, throughout the film, but definitely like the very beginning, it was just like, wow, this is so graphic. This is a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the fact that it makes sense because it said, it's like sets the story, and like when we tell the story of like Belladonna of Sadness, like of course the first scene is going to be, a sexual assault, but it's like then you see it, and that as a viewer, it's like very graphic, and I'm someone who I end up watching a lot of pornographic animation.
Yeah.
Just because of my research, and like of course there's sexual violence in it, but it's showing sexual violence as sexual violence. Like, we're not supposed to find it beautiful.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to be aroused by it.
It's horrifying.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. What was supposed to be the happiest day of her life became the worst day of her life.
Yeah, and like suddenly open, this new direction to her. It's like, and I mean, at the time, like those themes were not really talked about in animation. And like 10 years after, we started to have all of the like lolly anime that features a lot of like sexual violence and everything. And Belladonna of Sadness like had managed to really capture something. Have you guys seen Kirikou?
I have not.
Kirikou is like the story of this little child that is very small that live in I think like a named African country, and there is this witch that is like terrorizing everybody. It's like if like Jeanne actually went evil, because it talks a lot about like how can society hurt women.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to like give too much spoiler for the film if like if you guys want to watch it, and like if other people want to watch it, but I know for like a movie that like is able to like think about it in a smart way, represented in a and it's not as violent, of course.
But why, like, just the turn of, like, why a woman would, rather than still being positive or still trying to be helpful, why they would turn bad because of things that happen to them.
Yeah, it's really like the monstrous. It's like when you become like, it's almost like choosing to become a monster. And it's almost what like Jeanne was saying, like not only she thought she would become ugly, but also like she almost wanted to it.
Yeah.
You know, because of the society we live in, like women that are going to be considered ugly, for some people they feel like it's going to be a protectionist. Like the whole thing was like, oh, how could she go through like sexual abuse, which we know, like as people who experience the world as like women, how you dress, what you look like will never
It
protect you.
doesn't. Yeah.
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 Mm-hmm.
But like that, even her, like she kind of thought like it would be a solution. And it's like, and for some women, it's like to protect myself, like I'm going to stop wearing makeup, you know, I'm going to stop taking care of myself, because I think it's going to protect me. It's like a defense mechanism.
Yeah. I've even seen that, which, I mean, I know this isn't shoujo, guys, so like put your pitchforks down. But in Apothecary Diaries, the female lead, her name's Mao Mao, which I guess slight spoilers, not for real, but you find this out in like the first couple episodes and stuff, that she puts freckles on her face. Like people think that she was born like that, but she actually like gets clay and puts freckles on her face because where she grew up, like near the red light district, if you looked ugly, if you didn't look like the beauty standard, then nobody's going to pull you off to the side and assault you. And that's the reason why she like does that versus leaving her face normal as she's living in the royal palace and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Does anybody else have any more Rocky Road?
I just put that we didn't even get to know who Jeanne was before this trauma. And that makes me sad because I would have liked to know her for, you know, at her best too.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're really presenting like both Jeanne and Jean, like they're presented as isolated. You know, they don't have friends, they don't have family. Like we don't know, you know, someone that could have like helped them, which make it even more surprising that then they would want to stay in the city.
It's like it could go both ways. Like they don't have family either away that they could go to or keeping them there. So then in a sense, really nothing's keeping them there, but they also don't have like an anchor to go to. So it's like, you don't know.
Yeah. The last one that I had, I put this in Rocky, it just made me sad, is that the only time we see Jeanne have sex and it's not violent is when she's having sex with Jeanne. And I think it's like the first time we've ever seen them together in that way.
Yeah.
And that made me sad because I think sex, it's always been traumatic for Jeanne. And so for the one time for it to be beautiful to be with Jeanne, and it's kind of just to convince her to go to the feudal lord castle, that made me sad.
That was heartbreaking but beautiful at the same time. It was kind of hard to know what to think. There was also confusion around it because it's like we don't know about intentions, and like I had said, I was surprised that she didn't like see through his like selfishness kind of wanting to be self-protecting under the guise of protecting her.
Well, it's almost also like her not really knowing her own boundaries. You know, she think of like sex as a way for people to get power or like to get something, and doesn't really see herself anymore as like someone who deserves like affection or care. And she just think of herself as a bad person. So it's possible that like she believes kind of, you know, whatever like Jean is like saying or reflecting of her.
Yeah. Like she doesn't think that she has a choice, really. That's why, at least in the very beginning, because it was depicted beautifully, but at first I was just like, Jeanne,
come on,
are you all right with this? Like, are we upset? Like, I was trying to figure out, like, oh, okay, this doesn't look as terrible as the rest. I guess it's okay. Like, yeah. Okay, so I guess we can move on to Nuts. And Nuts is just, I guess the scene is just crazy. Something that you didn't really expect to see that was in the film.
Well, like the page was kind of like a weird segue, which I know it was a way to kind of get rid or like of the Lady Lord to kind of just have like one identified like enemy, like, you know, from a narrative point of view it works, and then to have it like start something for like the Lord. But
yeah, it was just so weird. Like when he started to appear, I was like, I don't know who that is. When it was like, oh, I'm the page, I was like, who are you, young person? And I think it was well done, but I know I was just like, what is this?
Yeah, I guess in a way it was sort of karma because, you know, the feudal lady is the person that said that Jeanne should be raped.
Mm-hmm.
And then is the person that repeatedly said she should be burned at the stake. And so, in essence, giving the page to Belladonna, it's like, it's dark, but it's like, in a way, it's your turn. Because, like, without the Belladonna, she never would have been with that page.
No.
I was surprised by the death because, I mean, at that point, like, because the feudal lord should have been able to tell, like, that the feudal lady did not choose this.
Yeah, you would think.
It's also a movie that has shown us up until now, like, so many instances of, like, violent sexual abuse. And, like, now we have, like, a sexual abuse that was, like, done without her consent, using drugs, you know. But, like, yeah, it's like, it felt like this weird parallel of he still got what he wanted and, like, she was still a victim of, like, sexual abuse.
Yeah.
But, you know, in a way that was different, but also, like, he could have also, I mean, you know, the movie had, like, a track record of this. Like, he could have physically assaulted her. And, like, and that's maybe something of, like, for the king or, like, for, you know, the lord, he didn't really change because he was just be signifying that, like, she was unpure or, you know, not worth of respect because of it, which is how they were, like, treating Jeanne from the beginning.
Yeah, even in the beginning, that's a really good parallel. Is that when Jeanne was getting raped and she goes back to Jeanne, Jeanne at first is comforting her and then starts choking her and kind of comes back to himself and is upset and cries. But then it's as if with the feudal order, the king, he didn't stop that urge to kill. He went with it. He was just like, no, I'm not going to accept you, even if I know it's not your fault.
Honestly, I kind of thought like he was dying in the first minute when he ran away. And then when the devil was like, look, your husband is just lying on his bed, I was like, he's still here?
Yeah, I kind of had that confusion too. I was like, oh,
I thought he was dead on his bed. With like his open mouth.
Right, I was like, oh, he just died on the bed. That's it's over.
I was like, no, turns out he's here until the end.
No, he just gaslit her like, oh, he's gonna die a miserable death. It's like, how do you know? Like,
well, he got stabbed to death by everybody at the end. So some would call it miserable, but
I was gonna say, is that one of your nuts points? I actually had that in I Scream, You Scream, that despite everything, Jeanne dies a miserable death. It was not avoidable.
Yeah. Oh, the nuts point that I had is the massive entangled hair orgy.
Okay. Yeah. That was a lot.
I was just like, when is this gonna end? Like, it just felt like, okay, it looks like the villagers are having sex. There's a little bit of demon in there. There's random hairs everywhere. I was like, okay, I get it.
Like, I think I've watched too many pornographic animation films. I'm like, this is normal.
A regular viewing experience.
Well, because I kind of always say, I'm like, might as well use the medium, you know?
Yeah.
Might as well do something totally different with, like, what you can. But I liked to see also, like, you know, Jeanne, who had a disabled body, to be in a sex scene.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that, like,
yeah,
I don't know, I really like the way it was still shown and, like, not hide and also not presented as, like, Jeanne never, like, was shocked by it.
Yeah, I really liked that too. She was, like, even, like, just tenderly embracing where his hand was.
Like, it felt like a good, like, inclusive moment in this movie.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, like, as we were saying in regards to just shoujo in general, like, representation matters.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which reminds me, I think there's actually an issue with that in the US that disabled people aren't allowed to get married. I guess it depends on like the severity of the disability, but they're not allowed to get married. And for whatever reason, they're not allowed to have a certain amount of money in their like savings or whatever. Which is ridiculous. Just because somebody is disabled doesn't mean that they can't be married to somebody that they love.
Right, that doesn't make any sense.
It's kind of insane that this is like, it's 2024. So it's like you would think that this should be changed. But
yeah, and
those kind of laws, they can also pass more easily because people are like very misinformed about the reality of disabled lives and how we know many people who have disabilities and like, you know, to different extent, of course, and that impact everybody's life differently. But there is this like essentialization of like disabled people, or like, you know, they're almost made a spectacle or like presented to us, or like to like people with like able bodies or like who don't have disabilities as like, oh, like we need to help them. They don't know what's best for them. Like it's really refusing agentivity and like sovereignty over your own experience as a disabled person, and being like, I know, yeah, I can get married, I can take decisions, all of this. So it's a big segue. Jean's right.
Yeah.
Also because I, in my work, I end up watching a lot of like sex scenes, and it's rare to see people who
Be disabled.
and like and need to be represented in a way that is not like sensation, you know, no sensationalism. Like it's not even a point that is discussed and everything. Like I think it's really beautiful.
I think there should just be representation for everyone and room for everyone. And like even when it comes to like pornographic material, like I feel like corporations are the people that make it. It's like they're trying to build a fantasy, but everyone's fantasy isn't the same. And fantasies can also be inclusive as well. So, yeah. But I guess if there's no more nuts points, we can move to hot fudge. I'll just say, in general, I think that it's crazy. I know that the feudal lady was jealous, but for a woman to order the rape of the gang rape of another woman is so wild.
Oh my
to
God.
me. That level of betrayal.
Well, I think it's really about class too, you know, and like her thinking that like somehow her statue protect her, and she's not the same as Jeanne, who at the time was just like a regular villager. And then like it's almost like, well, in the end, you know, even the lady lord end up being like, dying and like a victim of like sexual abuse and everything. It's like she thought like she would not be concerned. It's Jeanne is a working class icon.
For real. Giana, I know you had...
Yeah, I guess I will say more my controversial take. It's not a hot, like an angry take in the sense it's more hot, and then it's like, don't come for me. Because I do think that the style of this film and like this story was really unique and interesting. I just, for me personally, I got lost very easily in the media. And I don't want to say that, like, I don't dislike it or think it's bad in any way, but I do think that this story being as deep and, like, moving and powerful as it is would benefit a lot from a more palatable remake in a way, where the story is kind of presented more, I guess, I don't want to say linear because it is a linear story, but it's just, like, kind of, I mean, maybe I just like things to be spelled out for me more on the screen. Like, I feel like it would make for a really, really amazing series where it's like these scenes are more like drawn out and we see more interactions and stuff like that. Like that's just kind of how I feel about it. Like I said, I wasn't able to even really record a lot of notes because my brain was trying to follow everything all at once. And so I was like, I don't think I can like write stuff down. I think I need to just sit here and watch this. So yeah, that's my controversial take.
Like maybe if I know at the beginning of the film it says like once upon a time, right? And then it's like once upon a time Jeanne and Jeanne like were getting married, and maybe if there was like, I don't know, more of like a narrator,
right?
If that element was sort of added into like the narrative, if they went that way about it, like here's this story, and maybe that would have been more helpful.
Yeah, like there were some times where the narrator popped in and they're just like, time passed. I'm like, okay, time's passing. And I'm like trying to keep up. So yeah.
I felt like it was pretty comprehensive, but what I want to acknowledge is like I study cinema and I study animation, and I just end up watching a lot of experimental movies and kind of like movies like this. So I think I got trained as a viewer to get used to it and to learn how to approach them. And like, so I know like that's, when I looked at it, to me, it didn't feel like something or like a genre or a way of like talking about sexualities that I had not watched before. And probably movies that end up being inspired by this one, movies that have inspired this one. But yeah, I love experimental cinema, and especially like animation. So yeah, but then that's kind of the problem, is like if the movie needs you to have like all of this background to really enjoy it, like maybe it's also a problem.
Yeah. Like, I think it's a beautiful
Yeah.
medium and that it was presented in a wonderful way. But I think for like, I don't know, I feel like this story would benefit from reaching wider audiences. So I feel like if there was a way to present it in a more universally palatable way, that it would benefit a lot from that.
I think I was also able to get it just because since I had to write the hard serve summary, I paused a lot. So it was like I was taking in the film in increments. So because of that, I was like, okay, I'm catching everything. And so I was giving myself breaks versus Gianna, you like watched it straight out. So, yeah. So I see where you're coming from, because it's like if I just watched it the way you did, then I would probably feel a little bit lost too. Like, it's just like, what? Like, and stuff. But I wanted to take good notes for you guys
Thank you.
that were listening. So, like, the people who are listening to this that didn't leave after the content warning, we appreciate you so much. I hope you enjoyed this hard serve summary.
Yes.
No, but I think it's also with those kind of movies, we're not taking the movie out of its context, because we can analyze a movie however we want. If we want to focus on like female liberation and it wasn't the intended point of the director, we don't care. We do whatever we want. But we are taking the movie out of its distribution intentions. It's a movie that was shown like mostly in like avant-garde festivals. I don't know if it was meant to be, I watched it like in my bedroom on my computer today. Like, I don't know if it was meant to be watched this way. And maybe maybe it's a movie that like needs kind of the framing. It's like you need to know what you're going into. You need to have a presentation before. You need to have like, I don't know, a Q&A at the end with someone. Like, I feel like it's like an art movie.
Yeah, it's like an experience rather than a film.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
Like art house.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it was like a art house movie. Like, it didn't got shown a lot, but like this is where it was shown.
Yeah. And this is entirely different from what we usually review.
Yeah.
But I mean, which is good, but it's also just like we're so used to like Mamoru Hosoda or Ghibli films and stuff that it's like, this is definitely not in our wheelhouse, but that doesn't mean that it's like necessarily bad. It was just kind of like, oh, this is different.
Exactly.
Yeah, taking on a different way of looking at things. Yeah.
No, and I think we're having really good discussions on it, but it's like, it's a harder movie. It's not like a Shoujo.
Oh, no.
It's not a TV show.
This
it's
is like Jose. This is hard Jose.
Yes.
It's Shoujo Sundae.
Jose Sunday, yeah.
It's got a ring to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's like, but I'm sure like your listeners, they're also gonna like enjoy being exposed to like different things and hearing kind of the same. When you send me the categories, I knew about it because I had like listened to the show, but I was wondering, I was like, are we gonna do the banana split on this movie?
Yeah, it's like we're keeping to the puns, but it's like it's hard because it's like, oh, this is a hard serve summary because this movie is a hard movie and like floats your boat. Nothing. Let's just say likes. So
right.
But I think it works. I actually think we're like cutting the movie pretty well.
I think so. Yeah.
And although, at the beginning I was like, oh, I don't know if like those categories are going to work just because it's not like a TV show. And then the subject matter is very different, but it works very well.
Well, thanks.
I had my doubt, but it works very well.
Does anybody, I think I just have one last hot fudge. Does anyone have any more?
We've covered the other stuff in my hot fudge to some degree or another already, so I don't know that it needs repeating.
Yeah, same.
The last one that I had is just Jeanne betraying Jeanne by not opening the door for her.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, when she like ran back and stuff after the page cut off her clothes.
Yeah.
That was so hard. 'Cause, like, why didn't you open the door?
Right.
Like,
right. which makes me like even more confused about how she welcomed him back later. Like that would have been it for me.
For real.
I was just sad too because again we don't see like Jeanne's support system. Like her entire world is Jean. And then when she goes through something very hard, you know, it doesn't help her. Even when at the end, like he doesn't look for her in nature.
No.
Because she doesn't seem to be this far from the village.
Right.
She doesn't.
It's like a hop, skip,
like
and a jump.
someone stumbled upon her.
Yeah, he didn't go looking for her. He didn't like go into like apologize. You know, it was hard, but okay. I guess we can move into our final segment, I Scream, You Scream. Aurélie, what is something that you disliked?
Well, yeah, it's like, I think kind of same as you both. Like there were scenes when I was like confused and I feel like he could have done better. I feel like there could have been a bit more like a hand-holding for the viewer. I was like, instead of having so many things like just implied, you know, I felt like, again, the fact that we're never given the opportunity to like learn more about Jeanne. I felt like this was frustrated as a viewer.
Yeah.
It made her just this symbol or like just this woman to who things happen. But she's not like this like well-researched or like very rich character either. It's like she doesn't have really a life apart from the trauma that happened to her.
Yeah.
And yeah, I felt like I was sad about it.
Yeah, you're right. I think it would have been nice. Like, I know Gianna.
Like sad / angry.
Yeah, sad and angry. I think, and Gianna mentioned it as well, just being able to know who Jeanne was prior to all of this. Like, did they have a really, like, happy life? Was Jeanne so supportive and so there for her that that's why she just kept holding on up until the end?
Yeah.
You know, like, we don't get to know Jeanne through her happiness, just through her trauma.
Yeah, because then she's defined by the bad things that happened to her.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, then of course she's also defined by like how people talk about her in good. And like when they were saying she's very generous, she helped us, she cried for like my grandson, everything. But
actually, you know something I dislike? Why didn't the devil come out when they were about to burn her and stuff? Like,
yeah.
Where was the devil at that point? Because first of all, like Jeanne is violently stabbed and like she sacrificed herself so many times so that he could stay alive. So like, why did that promise get broken, you know? But then even outside of that, you know, after Jeanne had betrayed her and she goes to the wilderness, the devil says that Jeanne is his bride. So your bride's about to be burned to death. Ooh. And why would you allow that to happen?
I wonder if it's like, this just hit me right now. Is this one last betrayal because he consumed her soul, so he got what he wanted, so why should he help her anymore?
Damn.
Ugh.
Maybe that's what it is.
My heart.
I mean, even the devil betrayed
or like
her.
or like she chose Jean, so
you
know,
that's also probably part of it.
Yeah.
Or like she's shown that like she wasn't evil, or kind of what we were talking about earlier in the discussion is like that there was never any devil.
She was just hallucinating the whole time.
Or like it was, you know, purely like a cinematic like metaphor, but she never had like this help, and she was just, and almost like at the end it's like we're brought back to the reality that like women like her were burned at the stake, and like despite like, you know, nothing, and like, you know, no proof. It's like they don't have proof either.
Still learning so much from this. Oh,
right.
Okay. Are there any more I Scream, You Scream?
I have a couple.
Okay.
Without really elaborating on it, Jean's hand being chopped off because he can't come up with money, that sucks. Definitely dislike that. Also, I know he was trying to be comforting on their wedding night when he said, let's forget about this, our lives start tonight. But you don't just like forget and move on from something like that.
Yeah.
If I can, just my last I Scream, You Scream is the greed of the feudal lord and lady when they're asking for the 10 cows. Because if I recall, if they're saying go back to God or Christianity, I was raised Catholic, which I guess is different, from Christianity. But I think in general, we're all told these like stories and like moral like stories when we're kids. And I was recalling one where it's like, I don't know if it was church donations or something, where they were asking the people who are attending Mass to give donations, and the rich people give like
Tithes?
Oh, yeah. And
Yeah.
then there was like one pauper in church who only had a penny, and it was all that they had, and they gave the penny, and the rich people are like, you don't even deserve to go here. And the person collecting the tithes or donations or whatever is like, actually, this person deserves to be here more than you because they gave everything that they had, and you're giving a mere fraction. So the fact that Jeanne is giving his only milk cow as a dowry should be more than enough, rather than them asking for 10 times more than he has to his name.
And like they knew they were poor too. It's like everybody is poor. Where are they going to come up with 10 other cows?
Right.
Yeah, it's like an irrealistic demand. It's like
Yeah.
no. I have another one that I just thought. I don't know why it popped into my head, but you know when Jeanne dressed in green and started to go around and she talked to like one of the richest men who lent her money. Do you remember?
Yeah. The moneylender who said that she's possessed by the devil.
I feel like the money lender like drawing felt racially motivated to me. There was like something about it. I was like, it rubbed me the wrong way. It seems like to buy into like stereotypes of like drawings. I don't know.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Like I, maybe I'm just having like a bad memory of it, but and it's just me being like, oh, every kind of cartoon of this era always kind of do very harmful caricatures every time you go into money and everything. But I was like, okay, problematic movie.
Yeah. I mean, that didn't hit me, but I definitely believe it.
Yeah.
Maybe I saw it like quickly and I was like, my radar was just like, dun, dun.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was like,
Yeah, I might have missed the exact detail because I'm not recalling what they looked like at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, like, my thing is, like, I mean, if the feudal lord is trying to get money, why didn't he go to the moneylender directly to be like, you should be giving me more money?
yeah, that's a plot hole. Should we write to Muchi Productions and say, listen?
No, I thought they were gone. I don't think they're still around. I mean,
I think they're still around.
They might be still around, but I know at least Yamamoto, the director, he died in 2021.
Oh, yeah.
So he's gone.
Oh.
Yeah.
Rest in peace.
Really?
Yeah.
I guess I'll just put this as my last one. I thought that Jeanne was being so easily led by the feudal lord and stuff because it's just like, that man has only caused all of you misery. Why would you believe anything that he says?
Yeah, I'm definitely with you on that.
Maybe he was like, I'm going to cut your other hand.
Oh, God.
I don't think he was believing him as much as he was like, I don't want to die.
Yeah.
True. Okay, any last ice cream you screams?
Nope, that's it for me.
That's it for me too.
Okay, well, that has been episode 55 of Shoujo Sundae. Thank you guys so much for listening and getting to know Aurélie with us. It was amazing to be able to talk to you and to talk about your paper and your focus and this film with you. I feel like both Giana and I have been able to learn so much. And I'm glad, that's insane that we're thesis official.
Oh my gosh, right? I'm reeling.
I will never get over because when I did my master's, thesis is, oh my God, wow. So, we're thesis official people.
Yeah.
Yes,
oh my God.
thank you so much for including us.
Yeah.
No, you guys are very sweet. And I really think what you're doing is important. And I also had a great time. Thank you for bearing with my technical difficulties.
Oh, it's fine.
It's okay.
It happens to the best of us.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I feel like it was great, to talk about the movie. I feel like I learned a lot from your own perspective on it. So amazing time, amazing people.
Oh, thank you. Very, very much same to you.
Again, you're making me, I can do professional goal accomplished.
I cannot believe we're a professional goal.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, I need to be on this podcast.
Yes. I'm glad we were able to help you with this.
Yes.
Thank you.
But yeah, okay, well, you guys, and we just did, February passed, so I hope you guys, and technically this has been like back-to-back episodes posting on Sundays. So I hope you guys are ecstatic and actually really happy to have seen what we were like weekly, because Gianna and I felt like y'all forgot. So we wanted to be weekly in February to remind you guys like why we have this Patreon goal. So if you can, please join our Patreon. It helps us because we are trying to save money in order to get, I guess, sort of a part-time editor on so we can be weekly once more. So definitely go join Patreon. But we would also just like to thank our patrons as well. You guys are the dream team. We love you guys so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our Sprinkles patrons. We have Akemi, Pete, PJ, and Miles. For our whipped cream patron, we have Mark M. And for our hot fudge patrons, we have Mackenzie, Aaron, AJ, and Mark D. Thank you all so much for being our patrons.
Yes, thank you so much. And yeah, I guess the next time you'll see us, we'll be going over new anime series. Speaking of us calling this episode Josei Sunday, I think we're actually doing our first Josei series, which is just basically adult shoujo, this month as well. So check back in with us, not next Sunday, but the following Sunday to see which series we're getting into. But we know that you'll be excited. So
yes.
Yeah. Guys, if you would like to find Aurélie, where can the people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at my is my name, Aurélie, V, and then my last name, Petit. And yeah, I have a website. I made a website. I'm so excited to tell people, if you want to find a more like comprehensive like summary of what I do. And yeah, catch me around. I'm doing research. I'm tweeting. I'm getting into fights. It's all very fun. Oh, and probably, I'm finishing an article that I think is going to be great on pornographic animation and moderation. So be on the lookout for this.
Yes, we'll share it.
Yay.
Yeah. And guys, if you'd like to follow Shoujo Sundae, you can follow us basically everywhere. We are Twitter, Instagram. We're also on Threads and BlueSky, Facebook, at Shoujo Sundae. And then if you'd like to follow us individually, I am Chika Supreme. You can find me on BlueSky, on Instagram, at Chika Supreme, and that's Chika with a K and not two C's. Gianna?
Hello, I am Gianna Luna. You can follow me at Gianna_Luna_ across all socials. And on BlueSky, I'm just Gianna Luna with no underscores. If you're interested in music and dreamy pop, daydreamy music, you can stream my single Twilight Champagne on any music streaming platform.
We will see you guys next time.
We will see you then.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.